Hello, it's Brad Laurie, or BlockchainBrad, and today we're speaking exclusively with Icon. Many of you know it, you've known it for years, and they're certainly here to let us know all about what they're doing and what they plan to do in the future, utilising all the tech on the blockchain. Thank you very much to both gentlemen. We have the CEO, none other than Min, and we also have Ricky, who's also here to really showcase all the new developments that Icon have been making of late. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
So let's start with you, Min. I mean, everyone knows you. You've certainly been the face of Icon for some time. Give us a bit of a rundown on, why you're starting to, arrive back in the scene after many months, I would imagine, of just knuckling down, doing the work. What's going on with Icon and what's new?
Yeah. So I guess in terms of Icon, we had a roadmap out, and we've been following our roadmap. So nothing I will say is surprisingly new. We've been just sticking together and rolling our sleeves and just getting to work over the past few months. The biggest thing since January was is ICONists. It's the decentralization process of the Icon network. We've invited many node operators from all over the world to join our network to help with the governance aspect of it as well. Today we have about 75 candidates that are going through a campaign process so that by the end of September, we'll have 22 P-reps, or these are the super nodes that will be governing our network. So it's a very, very exciting process. We're in our last month. We like to say it is our last lap. In the month of August, so just yesterday, we kind of gave a small teaser of how that will look like with what we call pre-voting. So today, you can update or download ICONists wallet. You could deposit your ICX, and you could actually stake. You could actually vote for representatives that you want to, root for. And I mean, you could go to our tracker and look at all the exciting action that's been happening with all these candidates. So, a lot of these updates are actually, it's really awesome for our...
Right. And I mean, what's interesting also is that you're moving in that direction, that push for decentralization, most importantly, distribution, making sure that there is that true representation technologically of that ethos that you set out to achieve. Many of the 2017 iterations of tech and startups really haven't showcased that development yet. So, Ricky, I want to go across to you for a moment, mate. You're a new face. I haven't actually seen you yet, but I've certainly texted with you in the past. Give us a bit of a rundown on your role and what, where you've come from and what you're now doing to help support the ecosystem that is so well known, that comes from Korea and certainly came, with a huge sort of effect in the market when it did arrive.
Thanks again for having us on. So my background is more in the traditional finance space. I spent about 8 years in VC investment banking and equity research, primarily focusing on bank stocks, so things like JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, those sort of big players in the US. Really became interested in blockchain around 2014. Sort of just watched the space from afar, never really dipped my toes in, but it wasn't until early 2017 when I decided to sort of make the jump and pursue this space sort of full time. Met Min through sort of a mutual acquaintance and was brought on to the foundation in order to help on the institutional management side. So think about custody providers, OTC desks, market makers, exchanges. Is really trying to help institutions have access to Icon globally.
Right, and that's interesting you say that, because right now there's a strong push and message coming from Icon about the developments in that sector, particularly with institutions and with enterprise. But Min, I'm going to pull it back a bit to, let's say, 2017-18. I'm going to get uncomfortable for a moment, because back in the day, there was a huge narrative being pushed in the community, in the ecosystem, and it wasn't just for Icon. It was literally, in that bull scenario, everyone was happy, the ecosystems were thriving, but you were at the center of that, quite literally, flying around the world. But I wanted to get a sense from you directly, for everyone. What was it like to go through that very challenging scenario of being so incredibly successful when it comes to the outward perspective of price value of the utility token? Now, obviously, you can't comment on price, but you can certainly comment on this experience of what it's like to be caught up in the eye of whatever this was, the hurricane of crypto that you had to endure as everyone was talking about you, and suddenly things changed very quickly.
I mean, I have to say that is sort of the nature of the industry, so that we all faced the same consequences in 2018, where obviously there was big exuberance of the market. So it's not just the Icon, but it was the entire market that had very big expectations within a very short time frame. So there wasn't anything that I said or have done to kind of push that, in my opinion. What we were able to do and what we've been able to control is whatever that we wrote and planned in our white paper, we were able to execute it, down the line, so that, right. There's nothing that we can do in terms of the actual,
Right. Well, Min, respectfully, we've known each other for a while. I want to dig deeper into this, though, because once again, Icon had the success that many dreamt of in terms of attention, narrative, outcomes as well. And now, obviously, the scenario is slightly different. The landscape's different now, Min. So I want to ask you directly, because you have insights that so many do not. Do you feel that sometimes in crypto, the narratives and networks actually supersede the value of the technology, given that so many things can be pushed and peddled, so many agendas, so many camps, and there's such a strong effect when it comes to social dynamics?
So I'm not really sure if I fully understand the question.
Well, the question is really, in a nutshell, tech versus the power of social media, the power of narratives and networks. You've endured something that many people haven't. Given that right from the outset you were pushing something that was technologically based. You're showcasing something that hadn't been done before. But right now we see the power of narratives can actually overpower situations where startups are struggling just to emerge despite their strong team in tech.
I mean, I think you just have to give it time. I don't think we've put anything into narrative of something that we can't produce or we can't deliver it at the end of the day. So.
Okay. All right. Well, that was pretty direct. So, I'm going to go one step further. As an Aussie, we like to be direct, as you would know, Min. Now, given the scenario that did play out, the best thing an Aussie would come up and say, or the best phrase they would say, was, "What the bloody hell happened?" What would, from your perspective, what does cause something of a scenario where you see 100x movement, and then you see, a lot of people moving to other startups? A lot of their attention did shift away, much like, a very positive sort of wave that came through, not just, as you mentioned, for Icon, some other significant startups, but then there was that equation of a wave receding, the attention moved away. So why did that happen? Because it really did.
I mean, I can't really give you the answer of why the market moved the way it did, other than the fact that, there was a lot of excitement. There was a lot of, people coming in and being excited about what was going to happen. There were a lot of exaggerations. We, on the other hand, did not exaggerate. We're keeping our promises. We're just executing on the technological front. So we've done everything we can to make things happen. And of course, we've made some mistakes along the way, but it's not something out of the ordinary for a young project or a startup that goes through the process.
It's really interesting you saying this, Min. And Ricky, on that note, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned you've been around for some time. What are your thoughts on the discussion of exaggeration, of exacerbation, of, writing off, the hint of a possibility, and then it turns into something of a narrative that hasn't been proven sometimes in any context? It's a more of a general question.
Yeah, so I think the space just got a little overheated, and ICON unfortunately was a part of that. And I think just a bit of bad luck maybe with the timing, just given like when the ICX token hit the exchanges, and there's the exuberance that you saw in the market around that same timing, and then the impending crash. So I don't think that you can just point out like ICON and say that this is sort of the only project that this happened to, because there are countless stories that are out there that sort of have the same trajectory. And if you were to look at ICON in a vacuum and say, well, maybe if the token wasn't released in 17, and maybe the token was released right now as we're approaching decentralization, like where would you accrue or ascribe value to that token? I think maybe the narrative would shift. You see projects like a Cosmos or a Polkadot who maybe are seeing inflated values because they weren't sort of participating in this secondary market during one of the worst bear markets we've seen. So
right.
I think that.
Got it. Now, given all the knowledge and the experience that both of you have, do you also feel that the utility tokens themselves, obviously you guys having one that fuels your ecosystem as well, do you think that they are indeed true to what they purport to have, and that is that utility, that evidence empirically of being that fuel that does actually authentically drive the ecosystem forward? Because I ask you this because so many have actually fallen to the wayside since, and I first known Min, and since projects like ICON existed, many haven't performed as utilities. In fact, have raised questions of the overall value of these tokens in the first place.
I mean, just what we're doing right now itself is utility, where you have ICX holders that are able to govern the entire network by putting their ICX towards a representative that they want to believe in, that they want to trust, and you earn block rewards through it. And on top of that, later this year, we're building out the entire ecosystem growth mechanisms, such as that booster program and EEP, which is ecosystem expansion program, where these ICX holders could directly vote for projects that they want to support and grow the system. So, I don't know how else you would put it, but it's where the value of a on-chain governance system comes in, and that is full-on utility like you have never seen in this world ever before. So instead of the world that you see today, I recently published an article that describes that shows how corrupt this world is through centralization, how we're trying to reverse that shift by introducing a new way to govern through the blockchain technology. So through this, before, whereas we would be, putting our votes in candidates or these, congressmen that we trusted, but they weren't able to deliver on the promises that they made. Now we're able to actually vote for the projects or things that we believe in ourselves. Not only that, we actually get rewards for actually working. So it's like a self-run government that we're actually building through this system called ICON. So we're very proud of what we built, and this is, I would say, one of the most sophisticated governance systems that you see out there.
Right, and I mean, you've always maintained that. So I wanted to ask you both, now that you've had these years of opportunity to build the ecosystem, build out the team and the tech, what's the current status? If I was to walk into the ICON headquarters, what would the experience be in terms of overview of the tech and the team itself, compared to when you first started?
Sure. So I think from a tech perspective, as Min said, that we're nearly complete with everything that we've laid out in the roadmap. I think there's some interesting features that the men have already sort of laid out with EEPs and EPPs. Also fee 2.0, which is basically a fee sharing and virtual step mechanism, which I can go into more detail if you have questions. And then in addition, just the governance design itself can become deflationary over time. So you see these POS and DPoS systems that are basically minting new tokens to government. But our system is built in a way that as the ecosystem matures, transaction fees can negate any need to produce new mints or inflation. So the design that we've done on the technology front is, like Min said, sort of best in class in our view. There's even things on the horizon that I think are exciting that will be sort of forthcoming. And then on sort of the talent side, I don't sit in Korea. Min and I both sit in SF, but I've been there a handful of times. I would say since we've launched the project, there's been sort of an up tier in talent. I would say overall, and I would say people are taking even more focus, given that we're at this sort of final stage of decentralization, and sort of more pride in the work that they're doing and seeing like what we've created, and excited about the things that we can do sort of moving forward.
Absolutely. And Ricky, it's great that you did mention that there's also the SF office as well, because there's a real narrative coming from there of a new tone of credibility, a new tone of potential when it comes to blockchain being something more than just mechanisms for transfer of value and assets according to social context. We're talking about real enterprise, real businesses. Now, what's it like in that scene, given that there's been a strong influx of layer one solutions presented? You mentioned some of them before as well. Do you feel that in that context, you are well situated to be taken seriously among your layer one peers?
I mean, I'd say we are already taken very seriously. I think those are the things that we should be talking about. I mean, a couple of things. First of all, I think we've been talking a lot about the past, and I think there's been a lot of implications that we're very uncomfortable with our past, which is not true. We're very comfortable talking about anything about the past. We haven't hit anything. We haven't said anything that was, not true about our network or for the industry. So I just wanted to clear up that we're very comfortable talking about everything about the past, even some of the mistakes that we've made along the way.
Right.
Two, I mean, in terms of like the actual technology, we should actually be talking more about the deeper technology, the innovative features and innovation that we've been introducing to the rest of the world. We believe that we have one of the most promising on-chain governance systems out there, which will eventually lead to one of the best interoperability systems out there. So, you see a lot of the other projects and what you call layer one peers, we're right up there. And I think a lot of more and more, node operators or, more and more academia, so-called blockchain experts will be able to tell the difference and see some of the very interesting and exciting things that we're doing in the market. So
it's really interesting you say that, Min, because one of the true tests for the success and the integrity of the technology is the uptake of developers. And you would know this from the success we've seen of Ethereum and subsequent layer one solutions or new blockchain-centric ecosystems are trying to really get some of that market share of developers, obviously to build out and showcase the value. Are you finding that that's happening for Icon as well? And that indeed there's an organic adoption from the developers sector, from the programmers, from the coders, to really utilize the facilities that are afforded by the suite of tools that Icon provide?
Well, let me put it this way. Other than some of the DeFi and some of the games that we've seen, even those in itself, there aren't too much exciting things happening in terms of the dApp ecosystem or in the developer ecosystem. Yes, we see bits and pieces of promises that's in the community, but nothing, what you would consider as a killer dApp has actually come out still to this day.
That's true.
So I would say we're still in the same level of playing field. What we're more focused right now is getting, the governance systems, correct. Making sure that we're building out the features that we need in order to make the network very stable and scalable for the long term. So, I think just investing into different dApps, I think we've seen it all before.
Definitely have.
Those we've actually partook as well, which is, invest in some of the dApp ecosystem. Some of them are promising and very interesting, and we have high hopes, but, given the state of the market today, I think there's been a little bit too much excitement around dApps, at a very, very early stage. So.
And there certainly is that sense of a cooling off effect even now from that huge wave of hype. But I want to move back to that word you said of governance and really showcase what that means from the deep tech that you represent. So gentlemen, either of you, could you comment more to really paint a picture of the transition, of the developments, of the depth of the tech that you have created since the beginning, so that we can really understand that you're focused on getting the integrity right of the ecosystem?
Sure. So I don't know if we want to talk about a few things. The first is we kind of revisited everything about the fee structure of the blockchain. Mm-hmm. So we've introduced two things. One is a fee sharing model. So with, we have a built-in system that actually gets that operators to actually share the fees with the users. So they can even pay the fees on behalf of their users, so that the friction that's been happening for user adoption when it comes to paying fees, where in Ethereum you will pay fee in order to make the transactions, the user pays covers the fees. Mm-hmm. So we've actually changed that system so that the dApp operators could actually cover that. Secondly, we also have what we call virtual steps, where the dApp operators could actually stake some of the ICX that they've raised or borrow in order to, and the system will actually reward the dApp operators with what you call virtual steps, which is a smaller unit of ICX. Mm-hmm. It only used for transactions, so that it incentivizes more and more users to actually use the dApps, and incentivizes the dApp operators to actually operate without worrying about transactions.
Right.
So that's one example.
I think another one would be just the design of DPoC, which is delegated proof of contribution. It's just a variation of DPoS. So really we wanted to solve some of the issues we've seen with other DPoS networks, such as like a low voter turnout or voter apathy. We've seen like systems like EOS or systems like Tron, where you don't see much engagement on the voting of governance items. And in our design, we've actually rewarded ICONists for their vote. So ICONists will be paid in order to vote on governing the ICON ecosystem. So we think it's a little more sustainable, it's a little more equitable and fair, mm-hmm. And it's a thing that's I think very interesting in the space and really hasn't been done. You see other systems that have like commission or rebate sort of structures. You see sort of a race to the bottom on fees. With ICON, it's a set fee, and it's based on the percentage of the network stake. And it's an interesting piece that I think will be something that's very well received by the community.
And what's interesting also, Ricky, is that incentivization's become a really key component, really attracting those who want to literally use the ecosystem. Has there been any strong feedback, positive feedback already in the community since you've made these tweaks, these tech tweaks to try and really change the narrative internally?
Yeah, I mean, our community is very positively responding at the moment. Not only that, I think the more you go out there and you talk about the actual the network, how it functions, it's actually getting more and more people excited, because now you're rethinking how a government should be working. Right now in today's world, we as voters in the democracy, we hire basically politicians. We pay politicians with our tax money in order for them to govern or put in the bills and the policies that is, that protects the people, protects the businesses, that moves our, country or nations or cities forward. But we're turning around that model where instead of us hiring a congressman or politicians to govern for us, we're actually self-governing. So we're actually here voting for projects, for things that we want, we feel very passionate about, that we feel we're needed, and we're actually paying ourselves for the votes, for looking into these, projects.
Right.
So,
and I mean, you said it very eloquently. Essentially, it becomes a bit of a people's movement, essentially, and this technology can really drive not only tech innovation, but the upward social mobility, of many around the world globally, because this technology can give us a voice. But Andreas Antonopoulos raises an interesting point about the triad, or that a trilemma almost with regard to enterprise, people, and government. We've talked at length in the past about the top-down powers that be, and then right now there's a strong conversation happening, given that Libra entered the conversation very dramatically. Are you concerned at all, for the future with regard to the interplay between these parties and what the top-down influences can do, even those with very concentrated, centralized agendas? Are you concerned at all that despite the beauty of this technology and what it can do, it can actually be thwarted to really change the narrative from the top down?
No, actually, I'm not worried at all at this point. I mean, we're so early. The more projects that come in, the more attention that we get, the better it is for the industry overall. So, I think it's actually the opposite, where you don't see enough initiatives of companies or larger conglomerates or governments that are partaking in this movement that is actually more worrisome. So it's actually the opposite.
Well, what about in Korea? Because when ICON came out, there were a lot of allusions to government connections. There were so many suggestions of big partnerships with hospitals, universities and enterprise. What really is happening? Because we've discussed in the beginning of the interview that institutional partnerships are real and indeed developing. Many of them you're not telling us yet. So what is the case? How important are these collaborations with those with significant influence in terms of economic prosperity, in terms of business value?
So everything is a push and pull process. We still have the same relationships. We even have more interest than ever before when it comes to government participation with the blockchain industry, with conglomerate participation in the blockchain industry. And overall, Korea has one of the largest, I would say, in terms of retail investment in retail investors. So all in all, the pie is even bigger than what it was 2 years ago. There's a lot more excitement. There are a lot more enterprises that we're working with today than ever before. So I think people just need to be a little bit more patient in trying to see how everything will come together, in terms of like the legal framework or even in the technology framework that we're actually pushing. So, I think people are, you and I, we just need to understand that, we want everything to move at a startup speed. We want to be able to break things like very, very quickly. But, in reality, working with enterprises or these government, it takes a lot of time and effort. So again, it's a very push and pull process.
Right. And Ricky, based on what Min's saying, patience is not commonplace in crypto. It just simply isn't, because many people are here for that casino effect, for the blockchain bet. Often, again, as we alluded to before, it supersedes sometimes the real value of the longitudinal stance that many of the teams, such as yourselves, now that you're articulating, you are here for the long haul. Is that a challenge, do you find, in the overall picture that we call the crypto sphere or crypto landscape, when so many young, very eager participants of crypto are really looking for significant gains in the short term.
Yeah, and I think it's probably analogous to like the traditional markets, where you see companies managing their cash flow statement, their income statement in order to meet quarterly earnings. You're seeing that same sort of thing here in crypto, where projects are being sort of put under the gun for monthly deadlines or product launches, when in reality everything sort of should be set up for the long term. And I think we're seeing some of the issues in traditional markets today, where companies are not really investing for the long term because they're under so much pressure from their external stakeholders to meet numbers by a certain period. And I think we don't want to get into that situation with startup land, because we really are trying to do something special here. And I think it takes a little bit of time, and patience is hard to come by, but it is something that's needed in the space.
Right.
And if you put a little color around it, our devs are working on something that's currently securing over $100 million worth of value, and that could grow to billions of dollars over time. When you think about that and being under certain deadlines and certain targets that you have to hit, it's a little scary to put devs in those sort of situations when they're building something that could potentially secure hundreds of billions of dollars over time.
Sure. And to continue this conversation further, do you think that regulation and compliance are also going to further cement the prosperity of this industry, meaning that we'll see potentially a less is more effect with regard to a filtering of the so-called problematic startups, or the non-startups that were just shell companies or shell startups that really just had no plan but to raise capital? Do you feel that there's going to be some safeguards, there's going to be some light into the tunnel because compliance and regulation globally is becoming more serious?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very interesting how you look at things. From the ICON network's perspective, I would say that going forward, ICON from next month onward is going to be fully decentralized, meaning there's no ownership of this project. The ICON Foundation has spearheaded the project in the early days. We led the technology process early in the beginning. We've led the governance early in the beginning. We've actually controlled a lot of the nodes in the beginning. But once the nodes and the network becomes more and more decentralized, there's no one point or one person that any regulators could point to and say, like, you're responsible for this network. I mean, just like how decentralized, arguably, the Bitcoin network or Ethereum, I think the ICON is going to be more and more decentralized. And honestly, in the beginning, you said I was the founder of the ICON project. I am not the CEO, and there's a reason why I'm not the CEO. Is because the ICON network is not my network. It's not Ricky's network. It's the people's network. It is the ICONists network. So going forward, I don't think it really matters what the regulators do, as long as the people come together and we decide to build things, we decide to govern this network together as a whole. With that said, I think more and more regulations for example, how companies or how individuals should work with DAOs, for example, these decentralized autonomous organizations, or with other blockchain projects as a developer, as a contractor to a project, for example, how to treat your taxes, or how to do a lot of these things, I think will be will be more and more important, and we see it as very important today, because there's a lot of confusion with, for example, even some of the developers that we try to hire are confused how they're going to be, feels like this industry doesn't have any security that could provide families. So if we could together as with the government, with regulators, come together and build a framework that makes it more secure and makes it more comfortable for more people to work towards different types of projects that they feel passionate about, I think that actually is a benefit for the entire
Right. And so in that sense, do you feel that it's possible, Min, to have a scenario where you have a very robust, decentralized ecosystem by technological design and premise that's also going to be supported by agencies such as the government, such as enterprise? And I ask you this directly because often we see move away from that kind of approach because many of them require permissioned systems. We see evidence that in the way in which permissioned blockchains have emerged, non-tokenized systems where they've been incorporated into a corporate agenda right now. So do you think it's actually likely to happen, and have we seen empirical proof of this reciprocal sort of acceptance of a way forward in crypto so that these parties can indeed benefit from a decentralized system?
I mean, I think ICONs the proof in itself. I mean, we have actual evidence of enterprises using our public blockchain for the benefit of their business. So right now we have a product called Proof, the blockchain digital certificate, where governments or universities or even companies could issue these digital certificates on the blockchain, so they're not forged, and you could always verify these are authentic certificates. And this is just an example of the things that we feel very, very beneficial for these enterprises.
Right.
You could imagine how in the next few months we'll have other enterprises or other countries with other companies joining in and seeing that, wow, this public blockchain could be useful for other things other than just like digital certificates. Which
I see.
That there are other ways to use public blockchain. So it just takes a little bit of time for people to for enterprises or companies to gain a little bit of confidence to understand the product that they're using, and once they realize the security aspect of it, the ease of use, and I think UX is still a problem as we all know it, but once we find it's easier to use, you gain more and more confident in the blockchain. So I think it's just a matter of time that we see a mass adoption.
Right. And Ricky, I wanted to ask you, in the context of smart contract based platforms, obviously this is a scenario in which real business is designed to be had and built upon the whole framework that is the ICON system. Now, obviously, it's very different for the narrative of BTC or for Bitcoin, because right from the outset, the agenda was very different. But there are other scenarios where smart contracts are involved, and certainly pushing for a similar, decentralized agenda. So do you feel that there's space in the system for more than one? Let's bring up Ethereum, for example. They're really trying to build out the same sort of decentralized ecosystem. Can they work together? And tell us what interoperability means if they can.
Yeah, so I would say absolutely they can, and I expect there to be multiple platforms out there. I would think of each as sort of a digital nation, so to speak, and each will have their own sort of governance system. And I think, obviously interoperability will be needed in order to sort of transact across networks. It's what ICON sort of envisioned from the start. It's something that we're hoping to execute by end of year. Last I heard, we'll have sort of private to public interoperability into sort of September, and then public to public, assuming we could solve sort of single point of failure by end of year. So there is a lot to be sort of excited about. I think people who think it's sort of a zero-sum game are probably a little misled. I just think that each network will have their own community, and I think given the governance system that we built with it, I think anything is possible, and anything can be built on top of it. And we're excited to see where it goes. It's
really well said, especially that zero-sum game comment you made. Now, in that sense, we hear maximalist. We won't say from which camp, but it's pretty obvious from different ones that we see emerging now. When they say things like altcoin, and they say other more derisive terms as well, what are your thoughts, gentlemen, on that when we see this polarizing of a certain startup or a certain organic movement, and then everything else. When everything's so polarized, do you think that's a healthy thing or not?
I mean, polarization is never a healthy thing.
Well, I was just trying to dig into your sentiment on this, because obviously I don't want to put my own view forward.
Yeah, I think that these sort of tribes, I mean, I see where they come from, and obviously they're like well vested in whatever they're pushing, but I do think that openness is needed. This space is not big enough yet to sort of pick a side. I think we all need to grow the pie first before we start to see sort of who's going to be the bigger taker of the pie. And I think to jump in a camp, like the ones you mentioned, it's a little too early. That's sort of my viewpoint.
Yeah, I think my viewpoint is that so sometimes it is healthy, I guess, when you're trying to collaboratively pick out projects that might be harmful for the industry. So when you have enough knowledge sharing among smart people, and that actually result in catching scam projects or problematic things. But sometimes I think that also have side effects where there might be a good project or somebody who is actually trying to help the industry become a scapegoat for being blamed for something that that is not right. So I think that's just how the world works. It's something that I can't figure out, and it's something that we just have to accept, and we have to take part and try to create a much more inclusive community, try to hear each other out, try to be more positive about what other people are thinking. And if there are some wrong reasonings, we try to correct that and we try to move forward. So,
and it's interesting too, also, I mean, sorry to cut you off, but obviously there are lead speakers for different camps. Right now we see this literally proven on in social media, for example, leading out certain narratives, really pushing for the investments they've made and the followers that they have. So do you think that also there's an inherent question mark over these kinds of subjective interests because of investment as opposed to technological focus?
I'm sure there's a mix of everything. I mean, from all around where you had kind of a Bitcoin people where they weren't fond of Ethereum, and you had Ethereum people who weren't fond of the blockchain 2.0 or 3.0 crowd, and then you have blockchain 3.0 crowd who did not accept some of the newer projects that came out in like 2019, for example. So I think it's just kind of how the world works again.
Yeah, you're such a realist, and I really appreciate that, Min. So let's take that crypto cloud away from the conversation, the heavies, and let's talk about revenue. Let's talk about the future for you, and really focus on letting the people know that you're in that upward trajectory in terms of focus, in terms of building, in terms of potential, in terms of movement forward, in even empirical evidence of growth. Tell us all the positive stuff that's now and in the future with regard to your business structure, your business model. Despite being decentralized, are you also planning on producing revenue?
I mean, so you have to look at it this way. The ICON network itself, it was never meant to be a revenue-generating business. It's a network. It is a shared commodity. It's a shared asset amongst all the participants in the network. So, the ICON Foundation did the token sale in order to jumpstart this whole, the network itself, and by putting in the technology that was necessary and the governance system that was necessary in order to get it lifted off the ground. The next part is, okay, so we do have, what we call the ICON Foundation that, did the token sale. The ICON Foundation, it doesn't need to exist tomorrow. It doesn't need to, after everything is decentralized, it is actually the community's project going forward. However, the ICON Foundation will take part in being one of the node operators in order to secure the network. In the future, maybe once we feel that there are stronger, decentralization. We have more participants and even like smarter, what we call it, the P-reps or super nodes that actually are helping to build on top of the ICON network. Yes, I mean, ICON Foundation could actually disappear, and I'll be very happy for that. For that to happen. But until then, the ICON Foundation will, earn block rewards, with people's votes. So it will be part of the network. So when you're talking about the actual revenue model, that is one of the, I guess, the ICON Foundation's way of survivalship for the next few years. There are other methods that, the ICON Foundation, if we want to survive, we could do, but I think we haven't even discussed that, or we're just so focused on building what it was in our white paper till now. So that's that. For the actual for-profit entity called ICON Loop, that is in South Korea, that is actually the company that is building all the technology for the network. We're actually building applications on top of the ICON network. So and where we could actually get into contractual relationship with governments, with enterprises, to actually get them onboarded to the ICON network, so they could actually make revenues that way. So
right, and just to interrupt there, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I always looked into your technology, because I knew you had that focus on how you're going to sustain yourselves once you release a decentralized code for the world effectively. Because obviously you're going to have to need a means to sustain yourselves, and the loop is one way to do that. But I did want to pull it back now to one very tough topic, and that is token economic modeling for either of you, because it's not only is it tough, but it really requires a bit of an allusion to correlations between token value as a utility and ecosystem value, whether that be the open source code, whether that be a reflection on the foundation. There needs to be some sort of semblance for those to trust the nature of the utility. So can you give us some confidence that there is some sort of architecture or some sort of thinking being put into this, deep thinking, so that it isn't just a fundraising mechanism from the start, but it actually has sustained value as you go with it?
Yeah, so I'll let Ricky get into a little bit more details, but in our white paper, we have, when we wrote our white paper, we had some idea of how the ICON incentive scoring system was going to work. So IISS is basically it's a model to actually incentivize the token economy of the ICON network. And without putting, we have some idea, but of course, like after we did the token, fundraise, we were able to bring in some of the most, smartest people to actually come in and start modeling these token economics. And, I think in some cases, I think about, okay, like a lot of the other networks were able to launch a lot more quickly than the ICON network, because they've adopted something that are very simple, which in my opinion could work, but I think it's a little bit too simple for the real world of how we like to be incentivized, how we like to work, and how we like to govern. So we actually built a very, very sophisticated model by using different variables, and we brought in PhDs from different universities to actually build out these models. And we actually ran these models, maybe I don't even know, like thousands and thousands of times to get the right measures, to get the right incentives, to make sure the model is as perfect as it can be. And we will continually be refining the model, but I just wanted to get it out there that the ICONs model, we've worked on it for a couple of years, and we will not be launching IISS next month. We actually have all the token model working right now, but it'll be officially launched next month unless we had the confidence that the token model was going to work.
Got it.
We're going into a little bit more details.
Yeah, so I think, like Min said, you can do basically anything once you have governance laid out. That's the foundation. And we've done, I think, a very, very good job there. As far as like getting to your question on like value and utility, from my perspective, something's value comes from what you can do with it.
Exactly.
So I think, there are some things right now on our platform that you can use ICX token for. Is it as much as I personally would like? No, but I think that it's growing at a pace now with this governance design, and when it's launched fully, can grow at even an exponential pace, just given the amount of capital injection that it can provide for entrepreneurs. Outside of that, I think, like Min said, just the overall token economics of our design and the staking mechanism will be sort of best in class. I think I mentioned that previously. And then there are some aspects that we talked about earlier, interesting parts of the blockchain space that I would personally like to pursue. Maybe it's from like an ICX station point of view, but DeFi is an interesting concept. I think the ability to sort of access credit, even if it's in an over collateralized capacity, is sort of a foundation for any sort of economy. And like I said, we need to find use cases for the ICX token. Me personally, I would like to focus on sort of crypto natives near term, and then longer term, the game is onboard as many governments and enterprises. And I think that will take a little bit of patience, like we discussed earlier.
And Ricky, I think that many of the prominent exchanges certainly agree with you. We're seeing Binance, for example, move into more open conversations with agents in that DeFi industry and sector. Given that, I wanted to move into the conversation of exchanges. Not a popular topic for me, I would imagine, as a founder, because again, it's not about trying to FOMO this. It's certainly not about to try and send messages to people that there's going to be a pump coming. It's not at all. But in terms of liquidity, given that this is also a relevant part of the conversation of the overall model that we see emerging as a crypto industry itself, is the liquidity of ICON, as you would like it to be? Do you have the right exchange support, do you feel? Or what is to come from you, to your knowledge, in terms of, have exchanges been knocking on your door to bolster and support more liquidity?
So I'll take that one. I can't speak specifically about any particular exchange, but I will say, as part of my role and responsibility, my goal is to provide as much access to the ICX token from a retail or external stakeholders perspective in all geographies. So,
well said, almost practiced. So gentlemen, as a final statement, because we've touched on so many different things, what's the big picture for ICON? What's the thing that really you're most passionate about to drive this ecosystem forward, to let people know about that perhaps they don't know when it comes to the real integrity, the real value, and the real potential of ICON? Ricky, if we could start with you, go for it, mate. What's the things you really want to clarify?
I would just say that I think we hit on a lot of points. We're obviously not ashamed of making it through the bear market. We feel actually pretty proud. There are a lot of projects out there that haven't made as much progress that we have. And we're at the final stages of decentralization, and everything seems to be going very, very well. As been said, pre-voting launched last night, and we already have 11% of the network staked. I think that shows, within 24 hours how excited our community is to see where this is going. And I think, after that, we're going to start to sort of refine what the next steps are for the foundation and from a roadmap perspective. And we hope to provide some clarity once we finalize EEP and DBP and then interchain. And we were just really excited about where things could head over the next sort of 6 to 12 months.
And I really like, Ricky, that you're also not being, really finite and really specific, but you're just making it clear that the whole team's constantly in that frame of mind of building. collaboratively putting everything out on the table on that drawing board and just working through what is certainly, potentially doable, but all about, again, driving forward the real utility and the real value, not simply just narrative after narrative. So I do appreciate that, mate. Now, I mean, with you, obviously, right from the outset, you've always been very, very, very candid about your position. You've always said that, you want to build out this decentralized platform. You want it to be for the people, by the people. Are you on track, mate? And, what's the thing that really drives you forward?
Yeah, so, I mean, what we've always promised is interoperability. I mean, that is our end goal. We haven't digressed from that goal, not one bit. It's just that there are proper steps in order to reach that end goal. So, I think one of the biggest questions that we always get, and one of our, our biggest headaches, I have to say, is that we always get a lot of questions on interoperability. When is it coming? And, I think when we wrote the white paper, we looked at the market 5-10 years from the time we wrote the white paper. So, we have a lot of pieces and a lot of work that needs to come together in order to kind of build out that future. So, we're always looking at how we're going to connect not only ICON network with other networks, but even, our network with another enterprise blockchains that we've been basically building out for other, consortiums, for example. So it's coming. It's just, we're taking the proper steps, and, things like network security is way more important today than interoperability. Because, there's a lot of technology that goes into it. Token economics and governance structure is much more important today than interoperability. But once we have that down, we will slowly move towards interoperability. And,
got it.
That's
So the foundation's getting the foundation right. It's a very interesting sort of way of looking at things, and you're being very forthright about making sure that you don't mess up the real integrity, and that is making sure that the governance is spot on. More than ever, that's the focus this year in 2019. Gentlemen, I wish you all the very best as you continue to really showcase the focus now of governance to build out towards interoperability. It's great to hear that there's a real support for authentic decentralized technologies in concert with private and public systems. Certainly you're focusing on both sides of the agenda. And yes, go ahead, Min.
And so there's one more thing that I wanted to mention aside from that is, I've been a founder and entrepreneur for a long time, and there's a lot of things that we could do for short-term gains, and I've done that. I've played that in the past, and what I realized is that you always have to focus on building long-term value, and I think you've kind of briefly touched upon that. Is that I think we're not in this market for the next 2 years. We want to be in here for the next 10 years, next 20 years, next 100 years. We want to build something that is very lasting. And in order to do that, you have to build it right. And building it right takes time. And it takes a lot of energy to build out something small, get some feedback from people that we know. We have to rebuild it before we launch it to the public. So, I think that's something that, you don't see from a lot of projects out there. You see it from, some more mature projects like maybe Ethereum. A lot of people complain that Ethereum is taking forever for Ethereum 2.0. And, we fully understand the importance of that you have to get it right. And I mean, that's exactly what ICON is. I think we want to move, much faster than some of the other projects, but at the same time, I think, I want everyone to understand that we don't want to just create short-term value. We want to focus.
Absolutely. I mean, essentially, if we want to use the analogy of a car yard, for example, or an auto shop, you're all about building the engine. You're making sure your whole team is spending time really tweaking that to make sure that from governance out, to the beauty of interoperability, it's all conditioned by the quality of your tech. And while some others are sitting in their very, very souped up, shells with no engine at all and literally sitting in their car lot with no motion. So I do understand what you mean. I think a lot of people can understand that you're engine focused. You want to get this right from the, those building blocks, right from the mechanics, and then really go for it from there in the future. So gentlemen, thank you for being so real. Thank you for being so candid, and let us know what's happening right now in ICON. I'd love to catch up again if you have me, to get more updates in the future, so we can start to look at that empirical evidence of your growth, of your of the applications you're onboarding, of the private the loop side of things, as well as that entity builds as well. There's so many different parts to this ecosystem that you're building, but what matters is that the narrative of decentralization is strong in ICON.
Right.
That's great.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Take care, guys, and talk to you soon.